Patrick Bateman, a wealthy Wall Street banker by day and a sadistic killer by night. On the surface, he's the definition of success: polished suits, expensive dinners, exclusive clubs. But behind that mask of privilege lies something darker, a man driven by greed, vanity, and bloodlust. In Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, Bateman drifts through a haze of violence, wealth, and paranoia. Sometimes he's a predator, other times he seems like a delusional fantasist. But if Patrick Bateman were real, his story would end in one place, with handcuffs. At first, Bateman's privilege shields him. He's rich, he's powerful. He blends into a culture where excess and cruelty are overlooked. Colleagues see him as arrogant, maybe strange, but nothing more. That insulation buys him time. But privilege doesn't erase evidence, and Bateman's murders are sloppy. Unlike Hannibal Lecter's surgical precision or Dexter Morgan's ritualistic control, Bateman thrives on chaos. He kills impulsively, in his apartment, in public restrooms, even on the street. He doesn't wrap his crime scenes in plastic. He leaves blood, fibres and fingerprints scattered like confetti. Every victim leaves a forensic trail, a missing person reported. Blood traces in hallways and elevators, neighbours overhearing screams through thin Manhattan walls. Bateman's fancy apartment would become a goldmine of DNA and trace evidence. Blood seeped into carpets, residues in drains, and personal belongings of victims tossed aside. Even his attempts at body disposal are reckless, dragging corpses through lobbies, leaving evidence in garbage bags, making noise in the middle of the night. In the real world, building staff, doormen, and neighbours would notice almost immediately, and once they talk, suspicion lands squarely on him. Then there's the financial trail. Bateman lives in excess, and his victims are often linked to his own social circle: colleagues, rivals, women he dated, or people from exclusive nightclubs. That creates an obvious pattern. Investigators would notice that the people disappearing all moved in the same elite circles. And at the centre of that web, Patrick Bateman. Technology only tightens the noose. Credit card records place him at expensive dinners with victims just before they vanish. Phone records tie him to late night calls. Surveillance cameras in high-end buildings and streets catch glimpses of him leading people inside. Piece by piece, the net draws tighter. And then there's the psychology. Bateman is unstable. He can mimic charm, but only for so long. Under stress he spirals, ranting, confessing, and losing control. In the novel, he literally calls his lawyer and leaves a full voicemail confession. In reality, that kind of slip would end the investigation on the spot. One panicked confession, one witness hearing too much, and the case is sealed. Even without a confession, his erratic behaviour would betray him. Co-workers noticing sudden absences, friends finding his obsession with murder jokes unsettling.
I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane?
Once suspicion takes root, the investigation has everything it needs to crack him wide open. And unlike someone like Dexter Morgan, Bateman doesn't have discipline. He kills out of rage, envy, boredom. He doesn't plan his murders carefully, he indulges in them. That indulgence is what makes him terrifying. But it's also what would get him caught. Because forensic science doesn't forgive chaos. Bloodstains, fingerprints, surveillance, credit card receipts, and witnesses would pile up until even his wealth couldn't buy silence. The likely outcome: Bateman wouldn't outsmart the system, he'd unravel. Under questioning, his mask of composure would collapse. His arrogance would lead to mistakes. His paranoia would make him confess more than he intended. And his trophies, his violent rituals, and his trail of victims would leave prosecutors with more than enough to convict. Patrick Bateman might see himself as untouchable, a wolf among sheep. But in the real world, he's just another predator who leaves too many traces behind. And eventually, those traces would lead straight to him. For Patrick Bateman, the biggest illusion isn't his charm, It's the belief that money and status can hide the blood on his hands. Joe Goldberg. On the outside, he's quiet, thoughtful, maybe even charming. A bookshop manager, a man who seems harmless, even romantic. But behind the mask, Joe is something darker. A stalker, a manipulator, and a serial killer who hides his crimes in the name of love. In the Netflix series, You, Joe slips away again and again, leaving a trail of bodies behind him. But in the real world, his story would play out very differently. Joe's greatest weapon isn't strength or even planning, it's obsession. He studies people with disturbing patience, reading their texts, tracking their locations, watching from the shadows. At first that makes him effective. He knows their routines, their secrets, their vulnerabilities. But the problem with obsession is that it leaves a trail. Joe isn't invisible, he's always lurking, always watching. And in the real world, that kind of stalking doesn't go unnoticed. Let's start with technology. Joe relies on phones, emails, and stolen passwords to spy on his victims. But hacking leaves footprints, IP addresses, Wi-Fi logs, metadata, all of it traceable. Every time he guesses a password or breaks into an account, investigators would have a record pointing back to him. And then there are the cameras. Joe lives in major cities, New York, Los Angeles, London. Cities covered with surveillance, subway stations, ATMs, street corners, shop fronts. Each time he follows someone, each time he enters a building, each time he disposes of evidence, cameras capture it. Investigators mapping movements would quickly spot that Joe is always nearby when tragedy strikes. But the real nail in his coffin is the cage. Joe's infamous glass box, the place he imprisons his victims before deciding their fate. In reality, that setup would be impossible to maintain in secret. Specialised glass, reinforced locks, ventilation systems, every purchase leaves a paper trail. And once police suspect him, one search warrant would expose it all. Forensics only add to the case. Joe handles his victims up close. He strangles, bludgeons, and cleans up scenes by hand. But trace evidence is unforgiving. Hair fibres, skin cells under fingernails, blood droplets he missed. A single partial print on a body or object could connect him to a murder he thought was erased. Joe also struggles with his mask. He wants to be seen as kind, sensitive, even heroic. But stress cracks that facade. He lies compulsively, shifts stories, and isolates the women he obsesses over. Friends and neighbours notice, co-workers see odd behaviour, and eventually people start to connect the dots. Every time Joe enters someone's life, someone else disappears. Unlike Hannibal Lecter's brilliance or Dexter's discipline, Joe is messy. He improvises, he panics, he kills in apartments, public parks, suburban homes, places impossible to clean perfectly. Each panic kill increases the chance of leaving a witness, a camera angle, or a piece of evidence he can't control. And then there's psychology. Joe tells himself he's doing it all for love, but obsession drives mistakes. He keeps mementos, phones, jewellery, books, trophies that investigators would seize as physical proof. He writes inner monologues, journals his thoughts. In reality, those personal records are incriminating evidence, his own words sealing his fate. The endgame would come slowly. A missing person report, a victim's phone pinging near Joe's apartment, a neighbour testifying they saw someone matching his description, surveillance footage putting him at the wrong place, the wrong time, each piece of evidence stacking until prosecutors have an airtight case. In the real world, Joe Goldberg wouldn't be a mysterious phantom slipping away from crime scenes. He'd be a suspect under constant watch. His stalking patterns, his trophies, his digital trails, and his messy improvisation would betray him. The likely outcome? Arrest, trial, and the chilling headline of a bookstore clerk who hid a cage in his basement and believed his murders were acts of love. Because in the end, Joe Goldberg's greatest weakness isn't his obsession with others. It's his blind belief that no one could ever see through him. Ghostface. The mask, the voice, the knife. In Scream, Ghostface is less a single killer and more an idea, an identity taken up by different people in different movies. High schoolers, college kids, even close friends. Anyone can be behind the mask. That's what makes Ghostface terrifying on screen. But in the real world, that same idea would unravel fast. Let's start with the basics. Ghostface relies on close-range attacks. Knives, household weapons, and surprise ambushes. The kills are messy, bloody, chaotic. Unlike Hannibal Lecter's precision or Dexter's surgical cleanup, Ghostface leaves behind violent crime scenes full of evidence. Footprints, fingerprints, hair, and DNA. Forensics would eat him alive. And then there's the phone. Ghostface loves to taunt his victims with creepy calls before striking. It's iconic. But in reality, those calls will be the biggest mistake. Even with burner phones, law enforcement can trace call records, tower pings, and voice patterns. Once investigators connect multiple attacks to the same number or device, they'd have a solid lead. Text messages, voice changes, spoof apps, all of it leaves digital evidence. In today's world of cyber forensics, Ghostface's games would unravel within days. Ghostface also stalks in plain sight. He's often clumsy, getting knocked down, hit with objects, even outmaneuvered by his targets. In real life, that means DNA under fingernails, bruises, scratches, all hard evidence that would directly link the killer to their victim. And because Ghostface is usually a teenager or young adult, suspicion would immediately fall on those closest to the victims. Police always start with friends, classmates, and partners. Interrogations would quickly expose inconsistencies, alibis would crumble, and the mask would come off, long before the body count climbed. Surveillance cameras would also betray Ghostface. Modern neighbourhoods, schools, gas stations, they're covered in cameras. One recording of the mask in the wrong place at the wrong time, paired with license plate readers and store receipts, would narrow the suspect list fast. And remember, Ghostface isn't a criminal mastermind. Unlike Dexter or Hannibal, the killers behind the mask are emotional, reckless, and often motivated by jealousy, revenge, or fame. That recklessness leads to mistakes, bragging to the wrong person, slipping up during questioning, or outright confessing under pressure. The mythology of Ghostface works in fiction because it's about paranoia, the idea that the killer could be anyone, but in real life, the investigation would be straightforward. Forensics, technology, and psychology would strip away the mask and reveal the killer beneath. The outcome? A quick arrest, trials filled with media frenzy, and the infamous Ghostface mask ending up locked away in an evidence room. Because in the real world, Ghostface wouldn't be an unstoppable horror icon. He'd be just another sloppy copycat, caught before the final act.